Hello everyone. Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing popularity, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us continue bringing you amazing content. Your support means the world to us. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thank you so much. I should have seen the signs. Hindsight is cruel like that, pointing out all the little red flags you ignored because you trusted someone completely. That night started like any other. A buddy of mine, Mark, had just gotten a big promotion, and his wife, Lisa, was throwing a party to celebrate. My wife, Emma, had gone ahead to help set things up. She loved playing hostess, making sure everything was perfect. It wasn't unusual for her to get to events early, so when she told me to come a little later, I thought nothing of it. Said she wanted me to make a grand entrance. Looking back, I wonder if she was just buying time that I pulled up to Mark's house, the place already alive with music and conversation. As soon as I stepped inside, something felt off. It wasn't anything obvious. People were laughing, drinks were flowing, and the usual party atmosphere filled the space. But there was this underlying tension I couldn't shake. I scanned the room, expecting to find Emma in the kitchen or mingling with friends. But she was nowhere to be seen. That's when a woman I barely knew approached me. I recognized her as Lisa's coworker, but we had never really talked before. She looked uneasy, hesitant, like she was debating whether to say something or stay quiet. Then, in a hushed voice, she leaned in and murmured, "You should check the guest room upstairs." I don't know why, but my heart immediately started pounding. Maybe it was the way she said it, like she wasn't sure if she was doing me a favor or ruining my life. I wanted to ask what she meant, but before I could, she walked away. Disappearing into the crowd, I stood there for a moment, trying to push down the sudden wave of anxiety. Maybe Emma had just stepped away for a private conversation. Maybe she wasn't feeling well. Maybe I was overreacting. But something deep inside me, a quiet, nagging voice I had never heard before, told me to go upstairs. Each step felt heavier than the last as I climbed the staircase, the sounds of the party fading behind me. The hallway was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of expensive cologne and spilled liquor. My feet carried me forward before my mind could catch up. Stopping just outside the guest room door, I reached for the handle, hesitating for the briefest moment, telling myself that whatever I was about to see, I could handle it. That I was wrong. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. And there she was, Emma, fully naked, with another man. Time stopped. My ears started ringing, drowning out everything except the deafening thud of my own heartbeat. The two of them jolted apart, their faces painted with panic and guilt. The guy, a co-worker of hers, I realized in a sickening instant, stumbled backward, scrambling for his clothes. Emma's eyes met mine, wide with shock, her mouth opening as if to say something. But what words could possibly fix this? I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. All I could do was stare at the woman I had loved for years, the woman I had built a life with, as she sat there, exposed in more ways than one. The trust, the love, the laughter, we had shared everything. And now, in a single moment, it all meant nothing. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a punch. I didn't demand answers. I just turned around and walked out. Down the stairs, through the crowded living room, past the guests who had no idea that my entire world had just shattered upstairs. The music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses. It all felt like noise from another universe, one I no longer belonged to. The cold night air hit me like a slap as I stepped outside. But it wasn't enough to numb the pain clawing at my chest. I kept walking. Away from the party. Away from the betrayal. Away from her. But no matter how far I went, I couldn't escape the truth. My wife had betrayed me. And there was no coming back from it. I don't remember the drive home. One moment, I was outside Mark's house. The night air thick with betrayal, my heart hammering in my chest. The next, I was pulling into my driveway, headlights cutting through the darkness like a cruel spotlight on the life I had thought was mine. That I sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind replayed the scene in an endless, merciless loop. Emma's bare skin against another man, the way her eyes had gone wide with panic when she saw me, the frantic scramble to cover what was already too late to hide. That I squeezed my eyes shut, as if that would erase the memory. But it was burned into me now, seared into my thoughts like a scar that would never fully fade. That I should have been angry, furious. I should have stormed back into that house and thrown him through a wall. I should have screamed at her, demanded answers, asked her why. But I didn't. Instead, I just felt empty. The front door loomed before me, the home we had built together now feeling like nothing more than four walls and a roof. I stepped inside, greeted by the familiar scent of our house, fresh linen, her favorite vanilla-scented candles. It made my chest tighten. This was supposed to be our sanctuary, the place where we felt safest. And yet, all I felt was hollow. That I didn't bother turning on the lights. I dropped my keys on the kitchen counter and walked straight to the living room, collapsing onto the couch. The silence was suffocating. I wanted to turn on the TV, put on some music, anything to drown out my thoughts. But nothing could overpower the truth screaming inside my head. Emma had cheated on me, and she was still at the party. That I glanced at the clock. It was almost midnight. Would she even come home? Or would she stay with him? Was she even thinking about me? Or was she tangled up with him again, hoping I'd just disappear so she wouldn't have to face this? I stared at my wedding ring, twisting it slowly around my finger. I had put this on years ago, vowing to love her, to stand by her, to trust her. And she had broken all of it in one night. The hours passed in a blur, my thoughts cycling between heartbreak and disbelief. At some point, exhaustion won. My body shut down, sleep claiming me like a temporary escape. But it didn't last long. I woke up to the sound of the front door unlocking. My pulse spiked, my body going rigid as footsteps crept into the house. She was home. Emma hesitated in the doorway, as if debating whether to step inside. When she finally did, I could feel her presence before I even looked up. She lingered near the entrance, her breathing unsteady, as if she was afraid to speak. That I didn't move. I just stared at the ceiling, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. "Jake!" Her voice was barely above a whisper, thick with hesitation. I stood up before she could finish. The sight of her made my stomach churn. She still wore the same dress she had left in earlier, but it was wrinkled now, disheveled. I wondered if she had even bothered to look in a mirror before coming home. Or maybe she had spent all her time looking in his eyes instead. She opened her mouth again, but I walked past her without a word. I heard her breath hitch as I disappeared into the bedroom, shutting the door behind me with quiet finality. I didn't want to hear her excuses. I didn't want her to try and explain away what I had seen with my own eyes. I just wanted to be alone. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I waited for tears to come. But they never did. Only numbness. I listened as she moved hesitantly through the house. Pause in the kitchen. A slow walk to the guest room. The soft creak of the door closing. She wasn't sleeping in our bed tonight. Good, because I didn't know if I could ever sleep beside her again. The morning light crept through the blinds, dragging me out of the restless half-sleep I had managed to slip into. For a brief, blissful moment, I forgot. I forgot about the party, about the betrayal, about the fact that my wife had come home late from another man's bed. Then reality hit like a hammer to the chest. I turned my head toward her side of the bed, instinctively expecting to see her there. But it was empty, just cold sheets and a silence that felt heavier than the air itself. I sat up slowly, my body aching. Not from physical exertion, but from the weight of everything pressing down on me. My mind was still a battlefield, torn between rage, heartbreak, and the sick, pathetic hope that maybe this was all some kind of mistake. But it wasn't. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and just sat there, staring at the floor, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do next. Then I heard it. The sound of quiet movement coming from the kitchen. Emma was awake, For a moment, I considered locking myself in the bedroom, avoiding her entirely. But that wasn't who I was. I wasn't going to hide from this. I walked out, my steps slow and deliberate, like I was preparing to face an enemy. She was sitting at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee like it was the only thing keeping her together. Her hair was a mess, her eyes swollen from what I could only assume was a long night of crying good. She looked up as I entered, her lips parting slightly like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. I didn't sit down. I didn't make a move to grab coffee, didn't acknowledge her presence beyond standing there, waiting. Finally, she spoke. "Jake." Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "We need to talk." A bitter laugh almost escaped me. Now she wanted to talk? After everything? After sneaking around? After stripping herself bare for someone else? After betraying me in the worst way possible? Now she wanted to sit down and have a heart-to-heart. But I said nothing. She took a shaky breath, forcing herself to continue. She stopped, squeezing her eyes shut as if trying to gather courage. When she opened them again, she looked desperate. I don't even know where to start. I finally moved, pulling out a chair and sitting across from her. My hands rested flat on the table, fingers curled slightly as I stared at her. My voice, when I finally spoke, was low and sharp. "Then don't." Her brows knitted together. "Jake, please. I need to explain." Explain? Explain? What was there to explain? That it was a mistake? That she didn't mean for it to happen? That she still loved me? I wasn't interested in hearing the script of every cheating spouse in history. But I let her talk anyway. Maybe because I wanted to hear how she would try to justify it. Maybe because I needed to hear the pathetic excuses for myself. She exhaled shakily. "It was never supposed to happen," she whispered. God, I don't even know how to say this. I felt like we were drifting apart, like you didn't see me anymore. And I was scared, and I made a terrible choice.
I stared daher, expressionless.
"So you fixed that by screwing someone else?" Her face crumpled, fresh tears sliding down her cheeks. "No, it wasn't like that. I mean, She sucked in a sharp breath, shaking her head. "I was stupid, selfish. I got caught up in something I never should have. But I love you, Jake. I love you. That did it." The word hit me like a slap, and before I could stop myself, I let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "You love me?" I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. "That's what you're going with?" "Yes," she insisted, reaching for my hands, but I pulled back before she could touch me. A flicker of pain crossed her face, but I didn't care that I leaned forward slightly, my voice quiet but razor-sharp. "Emma, do you even understand what you did to me?" I asked, my throat tight. "You broke us. You didn't just make a mistake, you made a choice. And that choice told me everything I need to know about how much you love me." She sobbed openly now, her shoulders shaking, but I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. "Not anymore. I know I can't undo it," she choked out. "But I want to fix this. I want to fight for us. Please, Jake. Please don't let this be the end." I closed my eyes briefly, inhaling slowly. She wanted to fight for us? Where was that fight when she was lying under someone else? Where was that fight when she decided that my trust, my love, our entire marriage, was worth throwing away for a few moments of excitement? I finally stood, my chair scraping against the floor. "I don't know if there's an us left to fight for," I said, my voice cold. She gasped, shaking her head.
"No.
Don't say that. We can go to therapy, we can." I cut her off. "I need time," I said simply. "But don't expect a miracle." Her face crumpled again, but I didn't stay to watch. I turned and walked away, leaving her sobbing at the kitchen table. I didn't know what my next move was, but I knew one thing for sure. The woman sitting in that kitchen wasn't the one I married, and I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive the one she had become. Days passed, then weeks. The house had become a war zone of silence, filled with unspoken words, stolen glances, and the ghost of a marriage that was already dead. We moved around each other like strangers, trapped in the same space but living in entirely different worlds. Emma kept trying. She made breakfast even though I barely touched it. She sent me texts though I rarely responded. She hovered near me in the evenings, her eyes pleading for a conversation, but I never gave her one. She was desperate to fix what she had broken. But the thing about trust? Once it's shattered, no amount of glue can put it back together the same way that I spent my nights sleeping on the couch. I couldn't bring myself to lie beside her. The bed we once shared, the place where we laughed, talked about our dreams, held each other on bad days, now felt like a crime scene. And I couldn't stand the thought of being next to her, knowing where she had been one night. I caught her standing in the doorway, watching me. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion. "Jake," she whispered, as if saying my name too loudly would break whatever fragile thread was holding us together. I didn't answer. She took a shaky breath. "How long are we going to do this?" I set down my phone and finally looked at her. "Until I decide what I want." She swallowed hard, nodding like she understood. "And do you think there's a chance? For us?" I stared at her for a long time, my heart a battlefield between love and hate, between memories of who she was and the reality of what she had done. And I realized something, that I didn't want there to be a chance. Because even if I stayed, even if I forced myself to move past this, even if I tried to pretend like we could be okay again, I would never look at her the same way, that I would never touch her without remembering that another man had touched her first, that I would never hear her say, "I love you," without questioning whether she had whispered the same words to him. And I would never be able to lie in bed next to her without wondering if she was thinking about someone else. That wasn't a marriage. That was a sentence. And I refused to live like that. The breaking point came the following afternoon, that I had taken the day off work. Not because I wanted to be home, but because I couldn't keep pretending I was okay. I spent the morning walking through the city, aimlessly wandering past coffee shops, bookstores, and busy streets filled with people who had no idea that my world was crumbling at some point. I ended up at the park where Emma and I had our first date. I sat on a bench, staring at the spot where we once laughed over terrible takeout, where she had grabbed my hand for the first time, where I had really thought, that she was the person I would spend my entire life with. Now, it just felt like another LA.by the time I got home. I had made my decision. Emma was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of something on the stove. The smell of garlic and tomatoes filled the air. My favorite meal. A pathetic, last-ditch attempt to remind me of the life we had before. She turned when she heard me come in, her expression hopeful. "Hey," she said softly. "I made dinner. Thought maybe we could. I want a divorce." The words cut through the room like a blade. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She just stood there, frozen, the wooden spoon slipping from her fingers and clattering onto the floor. "Jake," she finally whispered, her voice trembling. I felt nothing.
No anger. No sadness.
Just finality. "This isn't something we can come back from," I said, my tone steady. "You made your choice, Emma, and now I'm making mine." She shook her head violently, her eyes filling with tears.
No.
"Please, we can fix this. We can go to therapy, we can—" "No, we can't," I interrupted, my voice firm. "Because every time I look at you, I see what you did. And I don't want to live like that. I refuse to." She let out a strangled sob, stepping forward like she was going to reach for me. I took a step back. Her face crumpled. "I love you." I let out a slow breath, then met her gaze. "Then you should have thought about that before you took off your clothes for someone else." She broke. Right there in front of me, she collapsed onto the floor, sobbing, begging, pleading. But I didn't comfort her, because she hadn't comforted me when she made the choice that ended us. That I turned and walked out of the kitchen, heading to the bedroom. The room I would finally sleep in alone. That I closed the door behind me, shutting out the sound of her crying, and for the first time in weeks, I felt free. The next few weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, quiet conversations with lawyers, and the agonizing process of unraveling a life we had built together. Emma tried to fight it at first. She begged, pleaded, promised she would spend forever making it up to me. She wanted therapy, second chances, anything that would keep me from walking out of her life for good. But I was done. I told her I would be civil. I told her I wouldn't make this ugly. But I also told her the truth. There was no fixing this. No matter how much she cried, no matter how many times she told me she loved me, trust wasn't something she could just rebuild with empty words. She had thrown our marriage away for one night, and now she had to live with that choice. She moved out first. I let her take whatever she wanted from the house. Not because I was being generous, but because I didn't care anymore. The couch we bought together? Take it. The pictures on the walls? Burn them for all I care. She left quietly, no dramatic final plea, no last-minute attempt to stop me. Just one last, broken look before she walked out the door with her suitcases, and just like that, it was over. The first few nights alone were strange. The house felt empty, but not in a painful way. More like a wound that had finally stopped bleeding. The silence, which once felt suffocating, now felt peaceful. That I didn't have to listen to her trying to mend something irreparable. I didn't have to sit across from her at the table, feeling like I was living with a stranger. That I didn't have to pretend anymore. That I started reclaiming my life piece by piece. That I went back to the gym, something I had neglected during the slow, unseen death of our marriage. I reconnected with friends, spent more time out of the house instead of drowning in my own thoughts. And for the first time in a long time, I focused on myself. The divorce was finalized faster than I expected. No drawn-out battles, no heated arguments, just signatures on a few pieces of paper, reducing everything we once were to legal documents and dividing assets. When it was over, I sat in my lawyer's office staring at the paperwork. I thought I would feel empty, but all I felt was relief. Months passed. One morning, I went for a walk, something I had started doing every day. It became a habit, a way to clear my mind, to remind myself that life kept moving forward no matter how badly you wanted to hit pause. I stopped at a coffee shop I had never been to before, sat outside, and just watched the world go by. People rushed to work, couples laughed over their morning drinks, parents wrangled their kids. Life went on. And for the first time in a long time, I realized mine had too. Emma was just a scar now, a part of my story, but not the whole damn book. I wasn't healed yet. I wasn't sure if I ever would be. But as I sat there, sipping my coffee, watching the sun rise over a city that hadn't stopped for my heartbreak, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. And that was enough. For now. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a comment and hit the like button. Share your thoughts. I'd love to hear your perspective.